This episode of Bullet Heaven was made possible with a copy of the game provided by Limit Break Studio. It's a pretty neat time to be an indie game developer. Anyone at all can bring a game to market with varying degrees of success, but every now and again, a lost relic surfaces making a first-time appearance on modern hardware, long after the original platform they were developed for has fallen away, claimed by time and obsolescence. 1993 Shenandoah is one such game.
1993 Shenandoah is a horizontally scrolling so-called Euro Shmup developed and published by Swedish Limit Break Studio. The original game was first developed by a group of teenagers back in 1993 for Amiga computers, but its development came to a sudden stop due to, quote-unquote, unequated teenage love. It then literally sat in a box unfinished for 27 years. Now that it's finally released, how does it fare against all of the shooters since then on this generation's best machine for them? Let's take a closer look.
1993 Shenandoah is both a throwback and a new title by technicality, so a lot of the concepts, mechanics, and controls are straight out of the early 90s. As a Euro shmup though, it also has a certain flavor to it that sets it apart from a lot of the shooters we've played in the past.
And this different style is present from the get-go. 1993 Shenandoah gives the player some money to start out with which to buy a ship. Basic Class 1 ships cost 600 credits and all have 2 weapon slots and identical speed. Their differences are purely aesthetic to differentiate multiple players. Additional weapons to supplement the player's fire will cost extra, so they will be unavailable until the player builds up their funds. Larger, more powerful Class 2 ships are also purchasable when enough funds are amassed. More on this in a bit.
Players have a bit of choice when it comes to Shenandoah's control. Players can use the D-pad on the Switch's Joy-Con or a Pro-style controller for digital control or the left analog stick for a greater range of movement. Digital control, as is typical, is all or nothing in 8 directions, but analog control allows players to dial in variable speeds on the fly in any direction the stick is pointed.
The player's weapons are fired using the A button, which is rapid and shoots at a decent rate. The player's basic fire will be enough to damage and kill off the player's opposition with relative ease in the beginning of the game, but additional weapon modules will be required to make the most efficient progress.
For situations that require a bit more oomph, a screen-clearing smart bomb can be deployed with the B button. This bomb will clear the screen of all bullets and most enemies. Additional smart bombs can be picked up throughout the game, but they will not be replenished from stage to stage or even between lives. This makes the bombs in 1993 Shenandoah more of a last resort, meant to turn the tides of a dire situation. This is in contrast to the rather more liberal use seen in Japanese bullet hell games.
Players also have a shield that can be moved around the craft in either a counterclockwise or clockwise fashion with the L and R buttons. Additionally, pressing Y or X will perform the same function. The shield will allow players to block most enemy shots, which will make the segment that was hit disappear. The shield will recover over time, but if the player's craft gets hit, the overall shield strength and size will decrease until it's completely gone.
If the player's shield size is reduced through direct damage, it can be restored with life pickups. If the player gets hit again after the shield is totally depleted though, they will lose a life. Unlike the smart bombs, player lives are replenished between stages and even after leaving the upgrade shop. However, in hardcore mode, not only is there not a shield at all, but only 3 lives is all the players have. This challenge is further heightened with no continues.
Some enemies in the game will release small diamond-shaped money drops for players to collect as they are destroyed. The more the player collects, the more cash will be banked for that player to use for new weapons, ships, and upgrades for both. The shop is always accessible between each stage, but the arsenal can also be summoned by collecting a special beacon pickup mid-stage.
Knowing what weapons works best for the player will take a long time to figure out, especially with the inherent cost of some of the bigger weapons that require more dedication than the less powerful ones. There are all sorts of weapons available for players to buy and test out. Depending on the weapon, players can add firepower that shoots forward, others at diagonals, and some that even fire backwards. This wide variety of weapons should definitely appeal to any playstyle at some level.
And the Class 2 ships facilitate a much stronger offensive loadout as they have 4 slots rather than just 2. In addition to modules being equipped on the top and bottom of the craft, modules can also be attached to the front and rear of the ship as well. However, while their shields are larger and wider, these ships also tend to be slower, making them easier targets to hit.
1993 Shenandoah takes place over the course of 14 main stages, with a final 15th stage unlocked after the final boss encounter. These stages aren't especially long nor especially difficult on rookie or skilled, but some can definitely present a challenge for players looking to get through totally unscathed. The real challenge lies in hardcore, which will definitely require a ton of practice and dedication.
But even at its hardest, 1993 Shenandoah is so inviting that we just kept going back to see the end. There are checkpoints here, but they only function as continue points after the player's lives are expended. When players die, they will simply respawn, which we really appreciate. If all of the players' lives are lost, they have the ability to continue indefinitely, and the stage will start again from the last checkpoint reached.
When it all comes together, 1993 Shenandoah plays very well with little to no slowdown and tight responsive controls, even with the larger lumbering ships. This is due in large part to how the game limits the amount of sprites, elements, and colors on the screen by its Amiga-spec design. It also helps that the Nintendo Switch is vastly more powerful than the Amiga, allowing for a much higher frame rate. Perhaps best of all, up to 4 players can take the game on, though one key difference is implemented. Players are limited to fewer weapon slots on Class 2 ships.
1993 Shenandoah's length clocks in at well over an hour from start to finish, but its stage variety and satisfying action makes it a game that we had a hard time putting down. Not only that, any stage outside of the final mission can be selected from the get-go. Better still, players can simply quit the game and resume their mission at a later time with all collected funds, thanks to the game's subtle autosave feature.
We found a couple of technical issues though. There were times where our ship spawned in really weird places, and it took a little while for us to find where we popped back in. In multiplayer, some music tracks overlap and continue playing when new parts of the game have loaded in, making for a messy, noisy sound experience. But there was also a time when we blasted away too much of a boss too quickly, resulting in an unwinnable stage. It took a lot of finessing at the cost of way too many lives to recover. Still, these issues are few and far between, and we can't really think of anything else that works against this game's favor. At the very least, it's all patchable.
In short, 1993 Shenandoah's flexibility, customizability, upgradability, and playability make it a shooter that anyone at all can dive into and have a really fun time with. Whether it be for a chill shooting session alone or with friends, or an intense 1cc attempt in hardcore, there really is something here for everyone, and it feels great the whole time. With an emphasis on getting through the game using as few lives as possible, there's always room to improve, which encourages replay. And there's even a simple scoring system to go with it all.
Scoring in 1993 Shenandoah is very simple, essentially rewarding players with points for enemy and obstacle destruction. In a lot of ways, the point score is secondary to the cash aspect, as no extends are awarded in Shenandoah in the traditional sense.
There was also a combo system as well. Defeating certain enemies one after another will activate a combo which mounts as specific enemies are quickly defeated. This combo will award players with bonus item drops like health, bombers, and ship upgrades.
In an interesting twist, players will maintain their scores even after continuing, but there's also a catch. Enemies that have already been killed will not award the player with additional points on their next attempt. This will prevent players from point boosting through multiple credits. The same also goes for multiple stage attempts.
But players can also boost their point totals by canceling enemy shots with their shields, which does a good job at getting the player's score at least a little higher when no other points are scoreable. Certain hazards can also be destroyed for additional pointage, but even this is not a sure thing.
Cash is also significantly reduced on continues and stage revisits, so the only way to get all of the weapons and ships to freely use is to grind certain levels to pick up predetermined money items that will always appear on the stage. One other thing to note, in multiplayer the score will be shared amongst all players, but the cash is only awarded to whoever picks it up.
So the scoring in 1993 Shenandoah seems a little inconsequential in the end. Especially since enemies and repeat plays don't award any more points with rare exception, the score seems moot at best. Still, comboing for additional items is at least a little helpful, and extra cash is always a good thing.
At the end of each stage, players will receive a breakdown of their score and performance for the stage completed, including shot accuracy, cash and pickups collected, and lives lost, but no bonuses will be awarded. At a glance, there doesn't seem to be anything especially noteworthy when it comes to the presentation in 1993 Shenandoah, but there are some clever details here that fall in line with its vintage computer origins. Details that belie its simple nature.
The sprite-based visuals in Shenandoah are all well animated with all kinds of little details in everything the game displays. The player's ships and their weapons, as well as the enemies and bosses, have great impact, despite their typically small size. This may seem like a given for a shooter in today's day and age, but what's surprising is that these assets are the exact same ones from 1993. As was the case in the original code, there can only be a certain amount of sprites on screen at a time, and only 32 colors can be displayed at once.
And yet, these limitations don't stop Shenandoah from having really cool backgrounds. Even in the very first area, a giant red nebula in the shape of a dragon seemingly roars as the player flies past. In general, all of the backgrounds work really well, with a wide variety of locales and elements that keep things from getting visually boring. Even the portraits scream 90s Euro PC game, which is a pretty nice touch.
Another great aspect to Shenandoah's presentation is its sound. The vast majority of the sound effects in the game are effective in conveying what's happening on screen. There is one sound effect in particular that is loud and shrill, but mercifully it doesn't occur too often.
The music is the real showstopper though, a satisfying soundtrack with all kinds of standouts, particularly in the forest stage. Its track sounds like it's alive with all kinds of alien bugs and creatures. Just excellent. Once again though, the shop music does have its issues in multiplayer, as it gets all doubled up and continues playing when the stage starts, but in single player it just kinda stops dead if a player lets it play.
Rounding out the presentation, Shenandoah's menus are simple to navigate with a real 90s heavy font that definitely evokes nostalgia for European-developed 16-bit games of the era. A help screen goes over some of the game's basics and players can check out the game's credits.
We did, however, have a slight issue with the game's player UI. It's confined to the extreme top and bottom of the screen in a very slender bar, and it can be very hard to see on smaller screens. Otherwise, it is still serviceable. So, how does 1993 Shenandoah stack up? Let's take a look. At their core, the game's controls aren't actually an issue here. They're sharp and responsive and lend themselves to a high degree of playability.
But players can respond in really weird spots when they die. This sometimes creates the need to traverse the entire screen to a safer position.
1993 Shenandoah's 3 game modes are perfectly tailored to the novice, intermediate, and expert player.
Anybody at all can jump in and have a good time with this game.
With 15 stages and a playthrough start to end that weighs in at well over an hour, there's a lot of game to play in 1993 Shenandoah.
With the option to play with up to 4 players, there's definitely potential for some great replay value, despite a limited scoring system.
Fresh from 1993, the limited colors and sprite count are purely by design.
This doesn't stop Shenandoah from looking great.
With a great standout OST and good effect production for the most part, Shenandoah has a great sense of style in its sound.
Some bugs and an annoying effect or two ding its overall quality though.
1993 Shenandoah offers players all kinds of choice with the option to customize the player's ship in all kinds of great ways.
Given this game was supposed to come out almost 30 years ago, this was really cool technical stuff that would have done well in its original era.
Given its extensive length and decent replay value, the $13 you'll spend is well worth the price of admission.
Single player is a lot of fun, but multiplayer promises a great time for its price.
Well, color me impressed. Despite early reservations we had due to its Amiga roots and Euro Shmup structure, 1993 Shenandoah definitely withstood the test of time, serving up excellent fun gameplay and a great presentation for 1 to 4 players. 1993 Shenandoah gets a 4.5 out of 5. You can get a copy of 1993 Shenandoah on the Nintendo eShop today for just $13 US. Holy smokes, that was a super fun game. It's pretty rare to find a shooting game that you actually enjoy playing, Day.
Yeah, don't get used to it.
I'm sure we'll find another Ikaruga for you somewhere. You liked Aces of the Luftwaffe too, though, didn't you?
Yeah, that was a pretty good game.
Then I guess it's up to our audience to find something you'll love.
Challenge initiated.